Hi, this is Mr. Herzon, Honors Biology, and today I'm going to talk about ecosystems. Ecology is the study of living things and their environment and how they interact with one another. Like the great naturalist John Muir stated, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And if you ever ventured to the San Francisco uh, Bay Area, maybe you'll have remembered that a tour through Merrill Woods, a national monument, home to the coastal redwoods. Uh, they can grow to a height of nearly 260 feet, and still up further north, some can grow until just under 400 feet tall. um, these coastal redwoods, if you had um, someone standing and that was 6 feet, it would take 44 more people stacked on top of one another to equal one of these giant trees. And if you're looking up this way and you you can you can see kind of like the blue sky, you know how is how are these giant trees connected with the sky or connected with the sun and the air around them, all the insects and other animals. There's also some other trees called the Douglas fir trees within these woods. It's really, really thought provoking how everything is interconnected with one another. Just for fun, I got to show you this one, the famous Chandler tree. Uh, when my wife and I went, you could not drive through this, but it's pretty impressive. Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is the guided notes, and what your task is to complete those guided notes while watching this YouTube publication. Um, this has scientifically uh, proven in education that students that learn note-taking skills helps them assimilate vocabulary terms and concepts, um, uh, you know, within a subject matter. So it's really important that you should do this. You can either print out the guided notes. If you want, you might want to increase the size of the font, um, but or you can use your computer uh, for the notes. So a habitat is where an organism does all of its living. Okay, it includes biotic, living factors, and abiotic factors, non-living. Okay, if you can think about what are some of these abiotic factors that would impact an environment. And if you're thinking about the sun, very good. Okay, that's one. Maybe some temperature. Okay. Um, okay, that's enough. That's enough. That's enough. I don't know how I can deselect those stickers, get them out. Well, oh, okay. I'm stuck with the stickers. All right. Yikes. Yeah, I got to stop that. Okay. There we go. All right. Got it under control again. All right. So remember, if you said sunlight, that's very good. There's different intensities of light and duration of the light, including like the angle of the sun. All right. Um, the length of the daylight. Um, we're actually getting less and less daylight at um, at this time, and until we come to the autumnal equinox. Okay, more about that later. Temperature, water, precipitation. So if you think about are we talking about fresh water, salt water, or brine, which is kind of like a mixture between fresh and salt water? Um, Constant or seasonal. If you think about deserts for versus like a tropical rainforest. And then there's soil and minerals, the types of soil and the type of minerals, and how much topsoil there is. Okay, ecological levels of organization gives us a sense of scale. Okay, now as we go down this list, we're actually getting much bigger. So if I started with maybe if I started with number 5, that would make a little more sense. The portion of the earth living, where living things are. Maybe I can, right? Go back. All right. And this is about 20 kilometers thick. Sorry about that. Biomes are groups of ecosystems that have the same climate and similar organisms living in them. An ecosystem is a community and its physical environment, and those are the abiotic factors. Community, all of the populations of the different organisms within a certain area. And then population, all the individuals of a particular species within a certain area. And I like to include who have the ability to reproduce with one another. Okay? I mean, that's a key thing in a population is survival and being able to find a mate and pass on their traits to their offspring. Okay? We'll talk more about that in evolution. Here's some examples of different types of biomes: desert, temperate rainforest, a prairie, a tropical rainforest, a deciduous forest, or the tundra. Here is a good picture of the different levels of organization and where we get to an individual all the way up to a biosphere. Okay. And the question is, how many species can you see in this ecosystem? You, aside from the animals, we're seeing some trees, some shrubs and grasses, and then there's all kinds of things that we can't see, but I think you get the idea. We have to count the plants as well as the animals. Types of nutrition, autotrophs. The word trophs has a Greek origin, meaning, well, relating to food. Okay. And the prefix auto means self. So autotrophs, they can make their own food. from inorganic substances, and they're known as the producers in an ecosystem. Now, producers can make food by two different processes: photosynthetic, or you have photosynthetic producers, and you also have chemosynthetic producers. Okay? So that's why the word it's not photosynthesis, which is the actual name of the process, but now it's written as an adjective to describe a certain type of producers. So photosynthetic, the use of light energy to make sugars, and this is part of the photosynthesis process, sorry about that, converts solar energy into chemical energy. Now, the energy is actually stored in the chemical bonds of glucose, which is a simple sugar. So, you can see right here, okay, most of the energy that's stored is in these, trying to draw these lines here. These red lines represent carbon-carbon bonds. Okay, energy can be stored between, the hydrogen and the carbon bonds, and the carbon and the oxygen bonds. But in the process of cellular respiration, it's these carbon-carbon bonds that are getting broken, and that's what transforms the energy into that gets picked up by another process. And we'll talk about that when we get to cellular respiration. Okay. Oh, I just hit the clear button and it goes away. So maybe you can recall the chemical equation for photosynthesis. We have 6 molecules of CO2 plus 6 molecules of water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. We make 1 molecule of glucose, okay, C6H12O6, and 6 molecules of oxygen that is given off as a gas, okay? And that's the symbol there for gas. One thing, in addition to the terms that are in bold, okay, like photosynthetic, all right, producers, know this molecule, C6H12O6. That's the chemical formula for glucose. And this is the chemical equation, right? Reactants on the left side. The products are on the right side. Now, the arrow means the word yield, okay? Now, when we look at this is called a chemical structure or molecular structure of a molecule. Okay? All right. Another type of producer is called chemosynthetic producers. These use inorganic compounds for energy, like the hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. This is an active link. If you do want to go ahead and watch it, I just want to save a little time by moving ahead. There are living organisms that actually live very close to these. It's really amazing, and so please watch. Okay, aside from autotrophs, Heterotrophs, the prefix hetero means another. And these are the types of organisms that get their food from other types of living organisms. Okay? So they must eat other organisms to get their energy. And these are known as consumers. Okay? Remember, I mentioned cellular respiration. Consumers must release the energy stored in the bonds of the sugars, like glucose and other macromolecules. So you can just see um, it's really not energy is released, energy is being um, transferred uh, to a more like unstable molecule called ATP. Okay, so notice that this is directly opposite from the photosynthesis equation. Okay, with glucose and oxygen, now the reactants, and carbon dioxide and water, the products. Herbivore is one such type of heterotroph. They eat plants to get their sugars for respiration. Okay, aside from the cow and the deer, there might be other types of herbivores that you can think of. Carnivores, the prefix carne is Spanish for meat. Okay, um, and if you ever had carnitas, which oh my god, I love, um, you know that's a good way to remember. Carnivores eat meat or other animals to get their compounds for respiration. A great example are predators that hunt and kill and eat their prey. Scavengers are a little bit different than predators. They hunt for their food, but they don't. Their food is already dead, so they start feeding on the flesh of dead animals. Omnivores uh, eat both plants and animals. And this might be one area of interest for you, is maybe studying ecology in college or university. And one thing, something that I don't have, is looking at um, the skulls of these animals and compare them. Like having the skull of a deer and looking at its dentition or the teeth, okay, really well established for grinding plant material, okay. And if you think of a carnivore, um, like for example, you know, uh, the lion here has sharp fangs for tearing um, large amounts of flesh, incisors to chop it, um, and then the grinding of the molars. Okay, omnivores, they have dentition of both. Some animals, like the bears and the mandrills, in addition to the central incisors that you can see here, ideal for slicing. They also have the big fangs, all right, but they also can eat plants as well. And that's evident of the molars that we cannot see here. Which type do you think we are? Good. Omnivores. Another type of heterotroph is called the saprophytes or the saprobes. These break down dead organisms from organic matter into inorganic matter. And these are the natural recyclers on mushrooms and bacteria, Um, okay. So what I mean by, what is it that you mean by organic to inorganic? Okay. When we get to the chemistry unit, we really will take a lot of time in learning that. But organic is something similar to carbohydrates, as well as like proteins, because they have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Inorganic molecules, substances are kind of like ammonia, all right, carbon dioxide, for example. All right, models of feeding relationships. This is the first thing is the food chain. Food chain, a series of organisms through which food energy is passed. Okay, so how we read this is saying the energy that's in the algae, okay, gets passed on to the zooplankton. Okay, and the energy in the zooplankton gets passed on to the small fish, and then to the squid, and then to the shark. A food web is not showing what eats what. Okay? Yes, it's true that a shark will eat the squid, but the arrows are representing the movement of energy, okay, going from here, the producers, to all of these consumers. Okay, so here, both energy as well as matter is moving up the food chain from left to right. I know up means from bottom to top, but this is left to right. Okay, energy pyramids. This shows the flow of energy from the producer to each subsequent trophic or feeding level. Only 10% of the energy at each trophic level can be passed on to the next level, because 90% of the energy is used by the organisms to do work, to grow, to repair. Okay, they need that energy for cell division. All right, all of the excess gets transferred in in the form of thermal energy back into the environment. Okay, so really, it's not an efficient system. Okay, the meals that we eat. Okay, all right, um, we're only getting using um, um, so what we eat, like we would be considered like a top carnivore in, or a top consumer in a grocery store, for example. All right, if you have kind of like a living grocery store, when you go and get the peas and go and get the potatoes, and as you move up the food chain, okay, only 10% of the energy actually rises up to the next level. Okay, and you'll see that in the next slide. Biomass pyramids, the greatest biomass, must be at the bottom of the pyramid, because only 10% of the energy of the tissues is available to the next level. So here it is. Okay, so if if it was a totally efficient system, we would be looking at a cube. Okay, but since only 10% is actually getting passed on each level, okay, all right, that's why each level gets a little smaller than the previous one. Okay, so 100% of all the producers, only 10% of that goes to the primary or the first level consumers, and only 10% of that goes up to the secondary consumers, and so on. Okay? So 10% rule. This is really important for you to understand. Okay? Questions? Please ask during class on Tuesday. That would be good. Food webs. Many food chains are linked together in webs showing feeding relationships within the ecosystem. Okay? So, for example, we have um, the marsh grass getting fed upon by the grasshopper, um, and which gets fed on. And you can see that the energy from the marsh grass is going up to the grasshopper, going up to the mouse, and then up to the hawk. Okay? All right? And you can see there's other food chains that are connected to that because shrews also feed on the grasshoppers. Okay? So which is more true to life, a food chain or a food web? If you said the food web, you would be correct. All right? Let's find the ribbed mussels. Okay? Let me move this back to the other side. Oops. I had it there for a second. There. I'm not winning too much here. There we go. Okay. So let's take a look at the fish. All right. And the fish population, if the ribbed mussels declined, and where are those mussels? Oh, right here. Okay. All right. So if the population of the mussels decline, okay, that's going to um, a decrease. Cause uh, the marsh grasses to grow more. Okay, as well as we would have more decomposers. Okay, and if you think about that, that means if there's more grass and more decomposers, that means more and more fish are can be produced, um, and so their population would increase. Okay, bioaccumulation, also known as biomagnification. Notice as we move up this food chain. Okay, all right. um, um, the biomass at each level decreases. Okay, but the total amount of toxins in the system remains the same. Therefore, the concentration of toxin at each level increases dramatically. Okay, so what we mean by the amount of toxin in the system, okay, so if there is a toxin that's in the water, a certain amount, right, in the water, you're not going to be increasing the amount of toxins or decreasing the amount of toxins. The toxins are either going to stay in the water or they're going to begin accumulating in living organisms. Okay. Now, when we look at this, during the bird's lifetime, the hawk's lifetime, they're not going to eat just like one or two fish. Okay. They're going to eat a lot more. All right. So as they eat, if the toxin is building up in the tissues, now they're going to accumulate more and more toxins. And it's so true of the large fish. They're not just going to eat a handful of small fish, okay, during their lifetime. So you can, so bioaccumulation actually begins to increase, and you can. I hope you can focus in on, you know, these little toxic substances, and you can see how much denser they are to one another. So, if one type of toxin that is in the environment is a chemical that's man-made to get rid of pests called DDT. Okay. Okay. Now, symbiotic relationship. This is a lot of fun. Okay. To determine the relationship between two organisms of a different species, and they don't always need to be two animals. Okay. You could have one animal having a relationship with a plant, or you could have two plants having a relationship with one another. Okay, so it's either one is going to benefit, um, maybe both organisms benefit from each other. This is an example of mutualism, like clownfish among sea anemones, or bees pollinating a flower, termites um, uh, um, and protozoa in in the gut, or actually, it's the protozoa that are in the digestive tract of the termites. Okay, it helps the termites digest the wood. They wouldn't be able to digest the wood if it weren't for the protozoa living in their gut. Okay. Commensalism, this is where one benefits and the other is not affected. Okay, so um, that's why there's the plus and zero, right? This is a good example of this are the barnacles that are attached to the whale. Okay, the whale is not affected. Okay, um, uh, the barnacles benefit because the whale keeps moving to new feeding areas for the barnacles. They're primarily a filter feeder, and they're just filtering out the food that's in the ocean water. Parasitism, this is where one benefits and the other is harmed. An example of this are like the pinworms that live in the intestines of mice and humans. Okay. Parasitism. And okay. Here's another example. Um, the bracelet wasp lay eggs on a tomato hornworm, and you can see the different uh, the process. So this is, I don't know, it's kind of camouflaged here by all of the pupae. All right, but this is an actual cat type of caterpillar right here. All right, and um, the uh, the pupae are slowly digesting um, um, uh, the caterpillar until they're ready to hatch, and then, like this one, ready to fly away. And I'm sorry, uh, I know this is um, um, creepy, but it's also kind of cool. All right, is this parasitism or commensalism? A tongue eating and tongue replacing isopod. So here's what's left over of the tongue of the fish. And the isopod, all right, lives inside of the mouth and actually feeds upon the leftover food um, from the fish, but also works as like a tongue for. So is this parasitism or commensalism? Okay, because well, the fish is not actually negatively or positively affected. All right. Yeah, well, we might think that it's parasitism, but it's commensalism. Kind of strange. Okay. Lastly, ecological succession. Ecosystems are constantly changing in response to natural and human disturbances. Like hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, deforestation are some examples. So, as an ecosystem changes, older inhabitants gradually die out and are replaced by new species. This change in the community is called ecological succession. So, um, if you think about a field of grasses and weeds, kind of like if you cross over to the walking bridge on your way to Frost, okay, you go from that mature forest, all right, onto that grassy knoll and up the hill, up to Frost, okay. Um, you know, left un, left unchecked, all right. Those grasses over the years, if now there's a softball field on there, but left on if you on your as you cross over the bridge on the way to the right, you can see some succession taking place because it was a softball diamond, and there's a that part of the cage there, but you know all of the soil, you know, has the topsoil has disappeared and has been taken over um, by the grasses. Okay, and there are some um, evidence of not shrubs, but maybe herbaceous plants beginning to grow. Okay, eventually, left unchecked, it will add to the mature forest that's along the creek there. Kind of neat. Primary succession. This is where no life where occurs where no life exists. Okay, all right. Volcanoes offer the supreme example of wiping out an existing life or creating new islands from under the sea. These new rocky surfaces are devoid of life. Okay, Mount St. Helens is one perfect example in which literally, and I think you can see it in this picture right here. The slope of the north side of the volcano actually slid off, and there was a pyroclastic explosion, wiping out all life and completely burying the area. And this is 1980. Okay, primary. Whoops, I'm sorry. All right. A pioneer species are the first species to populate an uninhabited area. Lichens are a good example of this. Okay, lichens is a combination of the algae and fungus that live in a mutualistic relationship, and they can grow on bare rock and secrete digestive enzymes that actually begin to break down the rock, creating a soil. Secondary succession occurs after disturbance in existing community without removing the soil. So this is typical of like a forest fire. All right. The succession of plants may end in a forest once again in a few years. An aquatic succession, a lake or a pond, can fill uh, can fill in with sediment, gradually becoming a bog. Okay, then a marsh, and then finally a meadow that you see down here. And this is what a bog looks like. And that's the end of this lecture. So please review all of this and identify what questions that you would like for me to discuss with you on Tuesday. Have a great day.